that were on the streets of Israel, 400,000 and more, those who have been on the streets of New York, of Britain, of Greece, Australia, all over the world, we need to realize that the force that we are protesting against, whether it's the Israeli government, the Australian government, whatever, is the same force. They're just different masks on the same global face. And the Israelis and the government and hierarchy and the Rothschilds, etc., have just as much absolute contempt for the mass of Jewish people as they have for everyone else. And this is an interesting thing that a lot of people don't realize, is that the first Zionist Congress was held in Basel, Switzerland in the latter years of the 19th century. But that's not where it was supposed to have been held to start with. The first Zionist Congress was scheduled to be held in Munich, Germany. And they had to move it to Switzerland because of opposition from Jewish people in Germany who didn't want anything to do, thank you very much, with being transported to Israel according to this Zionist agenda. In other words, Rothschild Zionist agenda. And then, of course, and I would strongly suggest this is not a coincidence, the German Jews were treated grotesquely in the decades that followed, through the rise of the Nazi Party and all that stuff, and of course the Nazis were funded by the Rockefellers, by the Bush family through the
on record. There were congressional hearings.
Exactly. The Rockefellers funded a whole floor of a German university for a guy called Ernst Rudin, who was Hitler's race purity expert.
The Kaiser Wilhelm Institute.
Yes, exactly. And it's like I've just said, Alex, there are no borders with these people. And if we see borders and divisions like that, we're going to lose the plot. And so as a result of the appalling way that Jews were treated in Germany, suddenly they were moving out of Germany to Israel, and they were moving to the United States. In other words, the Rothschilds got what they wanted as a result of the Nazis and what they did. This is not a coincidence. Now, when you look at Israel and their grotesque treatment of the Palestinians, it is a mirror of the way the Nazis operated in Germany in so many ways. Now, that is not a paradox, because the same force that was behind the Nazis, that treated the Jews in that way in Germany, is the same force behind the Israeli regime that's treating the Palestinians as they are today.
All right, stay there, David, and get a drink of water, because I can hear you need to cough. We're going to come right back. Long segment coming up, and we'll get into a bunch of other issues. I asked David what he wanted to talk about, and this is it. We'll be right back. Very interesting information. Ladies and gentlemen, bottom line, governments get power out of wars, and they get to take the liberties of the general public. And whether it's communist Chinese or thug enforcers here in the United States, Israel, or anywhere, they have the same wicked gleam in their eye of authoritarian domination, bloodthirst. And it's up to good people to stand up against evil people. And David was talking about divide and conquer. That's what the system seeks to do, is to divide us. My only mission, my goal, is to have humanity survive and thrive and to have a future. And I want everyone, race, color, creed, religion, to do that. But the globalists are masters at playing us off against each other, and masters through multiculturalism to actually turn everyone against each other in the name of that, and to try to force populations in together to play them off against each other. That's what's happening. And now the West has overthrown Iran over and over again. It's steaming towards war again. David Icke, is there going to be an Iran war? What do you see happening in the future? Where is this going? Gas prices, open announcements of world government. I mean, I thought we were crazies. But, mega banks will run Europe and the U.S. and issue the global SDR. It's all happening. Carbon taxes, Agenda 21, shutting down rural areas, arresting Amish everywhere, arresting people selling tomatoes on the side of the road. I mean, police running around with crazed eyes, military checkpoints now everywhere, TSA on highways. I mean, it is really starting to move quick, David Icke. What's happening?
Well, it is. And, you know, I've been saying for a long, long time that this is not just happening in the realms of the reality that we experience. It's coming from somewhere much deeper. And you cannot orchestrate. You've just articulated a long list of things, Alex, and they are a long list of things within an enormous, vast list of things that are happening, and they dovetail with each other. This is being orchestrated not by people sitting around the tables deciding the next move, but from very, very deep beyond this reality, I would suggest, and it's playing out here. A simple thing, and I've noticed this, and I'm sure other people have too, who've researched this. When something happens, there's never one reason for it. There might be a prime reason, but there's never just one reason. And what you've got now is and I've talked about it in this new book, funnily enough, which of course was written, finished some months ago, that on one side, they want this war with Iran, and they are creating mayhem and devastation in the Middle East. But on the other hand, of course, that's bound to have a massive impact, and we've seen nothing yet, I would suggest, on oil prices, which then devastates the world economy. So it's like everything connects to everything else. It's nothing's working in isolation. And as I've been saying for years, the time's going to come, we're here, when they are going to throw absolutely everything at us, so that we, in a panic, in despair, just say, right, do something, whatever. They're
lining up a whole bunch of agendas that build towards that interlocking nexus at the top, and they only do things if it adds another Lego or another domino or another stack in the pyramid to their whole agenda. You can see it like fractal nanotech. Yes, and exactly. I agree. That's what all the religions say. That's what common sense says. We're in the middle of space, and that's what you're saying. People get blown away by, but what are Christians saying? There is an alien or dark force. That's what my gut says. This is beyond human intelligence. This is a master evil.
Well, what's interesting, you know, when you research this is whether it's religions or whether it's ancient cultures or whatever, if you just take a step back from the different names and the different ways of describing it, there is an unbelievable common theme. The Sumerian tablets found in what is now Iraq talk about a non-human force they call that has become known as the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. In the Islamic religion, they have the phenomenon of the jinn, that are entities that operate outside of human sight, manipulate humanity without being seen, and manipulate human perception of reality through the human mind. You then have the... Yeah,
they play tricks on you. You ask for a ton of gold, but you better ask for it 10 feet in front of you. They're going to drop it on your head.
And then you have the demon theme within the Christian religion and what have you. And then you have the Gnostics, which is a word I understand means knowledge. These were the Cathars who were slaughtered. These were the people that ran the Great Library of Alexandria who were slaughtered, and so were their writings destroyed. But in 1945 in Egypt, a great mass of them were found, which gave the Gnostic view of what's happening in the world. And something like one-fifth of the texts are about entities they call archons, which are manipulating human society and manipulating it through the human mind, exactly what the Islamic religion says. And then you go to South Africa and the Zulu culture, where they talk about the Chitahuri.
Well, look at Jewish mysticism and all of that, and King Solomon and the genies and all that.
Yeah, Alex, it's all in front of us. If only we would stop dividing and compartmentalizing these things by the different names and the different name given to the belief system.
Okay, so I mean, this is pretty far out because I normally cover just political stuff we can prove, but obviously we can cover this for any audience because the elite at Bohemian Grove, Skull and Bones, they are obsessed with it. I've talked to people on record and off record, rich widows of very famous people, where their husbands were worshiping the owl idols, the goat idols. They really believe in this. I've been to Bohemian Grove. They are getting off on it. So even if you don't believe in this, atheist people out there, the elite are obsessed with this. None of them are non-religious, and they believe they're getting power from these entities. So what, from your research, what do the entities want?
This is the point, Alex, that you were talking about earlier in terms of Jewish people and the Zionist elite and all the rest of it. The elites that control the governments around the world are not following Judaism or Christianity,
Babylonian mysticism.
They're following what we call Satanism. And Satanism, if you really study it, is the worship of these entities under endless names that were perceived to be the gods. This is why the Mayans worshipped a serpent god called Kukulkan. This is why in Central America other cultures worshipped the feathered serpent god called Quetzalcoatl. All over you see this recurring theme. They are Satanists. And what's happening at satanic rituals while they're doing the sacrifice is the entities operating outside the very narrow frequency band of human sight called visible light by scientists. They're feeding off the energy of terror that's coming off the victim. And so a war, pepper bombing Tripoli or Baghdad or a world war.
It's a feeding frenzy.
Oh, it's a feeding frenzy. It's unbelievable. What is it? It's bloodlust. You see, you mentioned earlier, Alex, that, these people have a bloodlust. Well, it's not even, as we know, it's not even theoretical or symbolic bloodlust. It's a real one. They drink the stuff.
That's the old term, bloodthirsty.
Yes, exactly that. And so we have a bloodthirsty...
So you're talking about interdimensional vampires, basically, which we see them bombarding us with vampiric iconography. What is that? No pun intended.
This comes... this is where vampires come from. In Zulu lore and in other native cultures...
The ancient Greeks believed in it. They had vampire hunting deals.
Yes, they say that cannibalism was introduced to human society by these entities because they are cannibals and they eat human flesh and drink human blood, as do their hybrid representatives that we call the elite bloodlines and the aristocracy and the royal families and those that control the banks and all the governments and all the rest of it. So this whole human sacrifice, cannibalistic phenomenon came with these entities. And therefore, for a long time, when humans were, shall we say, less evolved than they are now, at least large numbers of them are now, they could openly do their sacrifices to the gods. And by the way, when they talked about the sacrificing young virgins to the gods, that was code for children. This is why so many children go missing and end up being sacrificed to the gods. But there came a point where humanity had grown up to the point where it was no longer acceptable to do this stuff openly.
So now they do it as wars. But what about Ezekiel? The whole Bible says, give not your children to the fires of Molech. I mean, it says children being sacrificed right there.
Well, yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is that people have no problem, Alex, that there was human sacrifice and child sacrifice in the ancient world, right? No problem. What I'm saying is it never ended. It just went underground because humanity reached the point where it wouldn't have it anymore. And it's happening on an unbelievable scale, I cannot tell you. The number of children that go missing in the world every year, never to be seen again, is utterly shocking beyond belief, because these entities want the energy of children before puberty, because at puberty we see puberty as a hormonal chemical change, but what it is to these entities is the human energy field of the children changes, and it plays through as hormonal change at the chemical level, but it starts and is fundamentally driven by an energetic change. They want the child's energy before that change takes place, and that's why they're obsessed with children, and that's why there's so many missing children. What's going on in the world, even to most conspiracy researchers who brilliantly, and good luck to them, are doing the banking, the wars, the manipulated wars, the manipulated terrorist attacks. Even to many of them, they won't go here. But this is what's happening.
Well, let me add a caveat to that, David. I'm sure you know about this, but it turns out DynCorp, who's been in congressional hearings running giant child kidnapping rings, I mean, even the UN said in a 2-year period and Southern Europe.